Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, complete the undefeated regular season, going 12-0, but are also continuing to rock and roll on the recruiting trail, landing their second commitment in the last 24 hours in the 2026 class. This one coming from four-star defensive lineman Bott Mulitalo from the state of Utah. Mateo U vibes, right? You just look at the physical traits and metrics, right? 6'4", 275, heavy-handed edge rusher. Then you turn on the film and you really get those Mateo U vibes. Like it starts with just heavy cinder block, strong hands, the ability to just kind of walk offensive linemen right into the lap of the quarterback. And then you see some reps of him, bursting off the line of scrimmage, running the arc and bending and winning with speed. I mean, this is a defensive lineman that's going to challenge offensive linemen in so many different ways. And you look at this kid and just say, the sky's the limit. And I think one of the things you love is there's a lot of position versatility. Kind of similar conversation we had with Mateo coming out of high school. You could see him just being a heavy-handed edge rusher, which is Mateo you kind of ended up doing. You could also see this kid kind of putting on weight, getting up to 300 pounds and being this dynamic, really athletic three tech as well. And I think at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway to me is Dan Lanning continuing to fill it up along the line of scrimmage on the high school recruiting trail. We kind of said this earlier today when we were breaking down that Washington game. We said, hey, what's the biggest difference between Oregon in 2023 and 2024? To me, it's what they're doing along that defensive line. Just a dominant defensive line that last night had 10 sacks, 16 TFLs against Washington. This defensive line, it's not just solid like it was in 2023. It's filled with game records. And if you want to continue that over the next couple of years, you got to fill it up with these kind of guys in the high school recruiting trail. That's exactly what Dan Lanning is doing. Dan Lanning knows the recipe because he's been a part of the recipe in terms of building premier college football programs. He was under Nick Saban. He was under Kirby Smart. He's kind of implementing that blueprint in his own way in Eugene, Oregon. And we're kind of seeing the results on the football field. This kid's really exciting. Want to get into the film, but also want to talk about the commitment Oregon landed yesterday in Kendre Harrison. Now, I would have broken that one down for y'all, but as a Michigan fan, I was kind of preoccupied going to battle with Ohio State. So we're going to talk about Kendre Harrison as well. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Oregon fans, whether we're talking on the football field, on the recruiting trail, in the transfer portal, the amount of support y'all continue to show to the boys means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys more than y'all know. Without further ado, let's get into Bott Mulitalo. Let's just start with the physical traits, right? 6'4", 275, carries that weight exceptionally well. Now plays more as an edge rusher at the high school ranks. This is where I think it gets interesting because you look at him and say, all right, he could easily get up to 300 pounds and play on the inside as a three tech. And quite frankly, I would probably project that that's what he's going to do. But we've seen Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy really value these heavy-handed edge rushers, right? Jordan Birch, Mateo Yu, big physical edge rushers that know how to set the edge, that can be tough against the run. So I do think that door is open for him playing out on the edge as well. And he certainly has the athleticism to do so. 77-inch wingspan with really big hands. Like those are all things you love to see and talk about when you're talking about defensive linemen. Then you get into the film, and the film is – I think this kid's fascinating because, one, you see the power, and that is not all surprising when you're talking about Bott, right? He's a guy that at 6'4", 275, you kind of expect some power in the hands, and when he just goes to beat the power and just wants to walk tackles into the backfield, he certainly can do that. I mean, just kind of ragdolling. You see that straight arm, powerful hands. Then you work through the film and say, I mean, this rep, 6'4", 275, 1, elite get off, 2, burst and bend on the outside, 6'4", 275, and you're going to bend around the outside shoulder of that tackle like that. That's kind of what makes Mateo Yu so special. Is Mateo Yu's not this one pass rusher that can only go speed to power right through tackles. If you don't respect what he can do from an athleticism and burst standpoint, you're going to get beat outside. I think Bott kind of brings some of those physical traits as well. Those first two reps, those kind of show you what can make this kid so special. And again, you love the hustle here. And Dan Lanning saw this and was like, yeah, we need this kid in Eugene, Oregon, chasing it down, making a play, creating a turnover. Those are things that win you football games, and that's one of the things that makes this Oregon team so special. Again, work and speed to power. That's like where he just fundamentally what he does is he just collapses pockets. It is so hard to have a clean pocket with a guy like this. And again, very similar to how we talk about a guy like Mateo Yu or Jordan Birch. Just big time power in the hands, walking tackles right into the lap of quarterbacks, and then having the athleticism to get off blocks and go be an athlete too. Burst and bend. And you just see a variety of different ways, really knows how to use that 77-inch wingspan as well, which is something that appeals to me. Go be an athlete in space. This kid's feet and athleticism for his size are incredibly impressive. Now, I do want to talk about Kendre Harrison real quick, too, because this kid, we've talked about him. So the Oregon fans, y'all kind of know how I feel about him. Number one tight end in the country, 5-star prospect from the state of North Carolina. It comes down to just God don't make many of these kids. I mean, he's 6'7", 250. He's a basketball player that I believe is going to play basketball for Oregon as well. Scores over 21 points per game on the hardwood. What I love most about Kendre Harrison, he's not just big and tall. You know what I mean? He's a really fluid athlete for 6'7". And so he's a guy that he's probably not going to be Kenyon Sadiq because he probably doesn't have the burst and speed that Kenny Sadiq has, but the blend of 6'7", 250, and then the movement skills, like find me a linebacker that can run with this kid, find me a safety find me anybody really that has the size, frame, physicality to deal with this kid at the catch point. What he's so good at is the coordination and body control. Like when that football's in the air, you can see this kid is used to playing above the rim on the basketball court because he can go track a football and make a play, contort that body really, really at an impressive level for that size. Bet on this kid every single day of the week. I would not be surprised if Oregon really gets it going on the recruiting trail for tight ends. There's just not many programs across the country that use the tight ends in so many dynamic ways that Oregon does. So if you're a guy like Lincoln Kier, if you're a guy like Kendre Harrison, and you're looking at this Oregon program and say, hey, one, they like to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. Number 2, they're going to use me, and not just as a run blocker. And again, Kendre Harrison with the 6'7" frame, I feel pretty damn good that he's going to be a good run blocker, but he knows he's going to be used in the passing attack too, which is a very, very appealing aspect about this Oregon team when it comes to recruiting tight ends. You look at the 2026 class, by far the number one class in the country. We're going to pull it up real quick. 2 things that stand out. One, it's the number one class in the country. You have now 9 commitments. When you start scrolling down, Cody Green, line of scrimmage, line of scrimmage, line of scrimmage, line of scrimmage, line of scrimmage. So we got, I believe, 9 commitments in the fold, and 5 of them are line of scrimmage players. That's how you want your recruiting classes to look. And Dan Lanning knows that's how the recruiting classes need to look if you want to consistently compete for national championships every single year. The biggest difference between the Mario Cristobal era and the Dan Lanning era is the line of scrimmage play for Oregon. And we've seen it all at 2024, but we really just saw it last night. Like, it's a dominant defensive line with 10 sacks and 16 tackles for loss. And then it just road grades all over Washington. And this is an Oregon team that can beat you in a shootout. They can throw the football around the yard. They recruit playmakers on the outside and quarterbacks too, but they can also just control games. And when you talk about going undefeated, the best way to make yourself bulletproof is at the end of the day, if you can control the line of scrimmage, you put yourself in a really good spot to win. Oregon can do that. And I think that's what makes this team special. Another massive commitment for the Ducks. Ain't many programs that are hotter on the recruiting trail than Oregon. We'll sign out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.